Present with everyone here, and we will call this meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock. If y'all will please stand for our invitation and our pledge done by Cherry Elementary this evening. Our invitation this evening is going to be done by the pastor of Turning Point Church, Fidel Messina. So thank you for joining us this evening. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. We all bow here, please. So, Father, we just come before you and we thank you right now, Lord. First of all, we'd like to invite your presence in here, Father. That you have your way in each and one of our hearts, our minds, our tongues, Lord. That we remind ourselves who we are, what we are, who we represent. Father, I ask you, Lord, for wisdom and guidance, integrity, character, and all the school board members, and the teachers, and the council, and just the teachers, everybody that's involved, Father. I ask you, Lord, that you impart in us the ability to always impart to your children your goodness, how to be. And Father, we thank you once again for all that you do. We thank you that you unify Bay City, Father. That you bring us together, Lord, to do good for the community. We thank you once again for Bay City and what it does. We thank you for our country. We thank you for our government, and we just lift them up, Father. Lord, we bless you in every single way. We thank you once again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Sherry, can I have with it that we recite the pledge to the United States flag. Ready? Salute. Pledge. I Look out for the Texas flag. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the United States under God, and indivisible.
Thank you so much. Thank
Thank you, Cherry, and thank you, Mr. Christina, for the invitation and the pledge this evening. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is celebration of excellence. We're going to be honoring our College Board National Recognized Student of the evening. Hello there, how are you all?
Hello, good evening. So we asked our college board liaison, Marie Lopez, to come and help with the presentation of these awards. These students are recognized by the college board for their academic performance involving those achievements that they have on campus. So we're thrilled to celebrate our students and recognize them for the great work they've been doing and for the strong academic performance in the classroom and on college board assessments like the BCISD and AAP exams. There's so much that makes our students unique, and to be with honors and free to work with the asset. So in order for these students to be eligible, they have to have a GPA of 3.5 or higher, PSAT scores that are within the top 10% of assessment takers in the state of Texas for each program, and attend a rural small town school or identify as African American, Hispanic American, or Indigenous Native. So big congratulations to these students. When I call your name, please come forward. Danielle Chavez, National Hispanic Recognition Award. And IE, she received the National Small Town Rural Award, and she's not able to be here because she's currently playing a volleyball game. Juan Martinez, National Hispanic Recognition Award and Rural and Small Town Award. And Isabel Villalobos, National Hispanic Recognition Award.
Congratulations, you guys.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. One more big smiles. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, guys.
All right. Moving right along, thank you all for coming this evening, and congratulations on that award. That is fantastic and wonderful. All right, next is our good news. Does anyone have any good news to share that they've seen within the district in the past month or plus?
Say that I've been there for the football games and the way that it's been organized. They are Johnny on the spot, the kids now sitting and not running up and down the ramp. Linda Leisner, all those guys and everybody on that team. It's a person at every spot that is monitoring, and it's been really, really nice to see at the football game. I can watch and not be afraid of the kids. So kudos for basically high school on the picture.
I thought we had a great team of 8 training. Good, productive, fun, smart, learned a lot. Good.
In keeping with the spirit of Arts Week, I want to brag on our Dungeoneers, both the high school Dungeoneers and the junior Dungeoneers. Been watching a little bit of the practice for the junior Dungeoneers. They're working hard. The show's not even until November. It's going to be fun, Hansel and Gretel. And then they just released the cap for a high school production, and it starts and the program is going to be successful for many years to come. So November 15th through 17th, if you get a chance for the junior Dungeoneers.
Great. I just want to say over the past 6 weeks at school, or almost the end of 6 weeks, we're not quite there. So that time, just the dedication that I've seen in all the places that I've been through, dropping kids off for sports things in classrooms, the teachers working overtime, principals, Dr. Mack and his team work, like everyone that I have seen everywhere that I have been since the beginning of school. It truly is commendable how much you're working and how much you're pouring your heart and your soul into our students and our community for the betterment of Bay City. So I just want to say thank you and great job for what you're doing. I see you and it's truly appreciated.
Staff also does an amazing job. It started within the first 6 weeks. There's a lot of safety drills to make sure we're on point, to make sure everyone's doing the right things for crisis management. Everyone's done an excellent job, and I appreciate all the work that goes into that. Tonight we'll get our safety audit, so I just wanted to mention that the staff did a great job, and that will be reflected in the audit as well, that they're doing a terrific job.
I'm thanking Ms. Wendell and her crew over there for taking the time to go through it. Each parent, the students and their parents go the first 6 weeks. I didn't get to attend it last year, but I got to go to this year, so I really enjoyed that. It was a little 15 minutes, but it was good, informative 15 minutes. Did a good job.
Anybody else? Okay, moving on, audience with patrons. I don't think we have anyone this evening. All right, moving on to LSG. Hello, sir, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good, there is a lot to talk about in LSG this time.
Yes, there is. I brought my computer in case we had to make changes.
Perfect.
You might not, but we'll see. So you may recall that back in July, we came and we spoke to you about the situation where we didn't really have stores, full stores, you know, from the spring. And we started talking about rebooting the goals because we come to the end of the HB3 goals, that 5-year period had run out. And we've got a revised STAR test, we've got a revised accountability system, a new way to have. And so it just makes complete and total sense. Schools across the state are doing this. They're readopting new goals for 5 years. And so we started talking about that. We had a really nice conversation in July with you for well over an hour. Just about what you expected out of the goals. We got the team involved. And I can tell you, your leadership team, the principals and superintendent worked really diligently and really kind of a short timeline to get these baselines targets set for 5-year goals. Because normally in a normal year, we would have results from the STAR test at the end of May, first part of June. But this year, all we had was some scattered scores for high school mostly. And then in August, we finally got some scores to be able to base to do baseline targets. So we talked about this, and what we would like to do is get the computer to work first.
Yes, it's moving back up.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the tracker for last month. So when we look at last month's meeting, this is in your little folder right there. The meeting was 109 minutes long. And 36 of those minutes were spent on student outcomes or those things related to that. And so that was a total of about 33.03% of the meeting. We had about 85% attendance from the board. There was just one missing. And you didn't pull anything off the consent agenda, and there were 7 other items. So 7 other items for what took the time. We're trying to shoot for, remember, about 50% of our time. And so when I go and just to kind of give you a recap, I had to turn in some numbers by districts given that. So I've actually got the numbers for the past year right here. So BCISD averaged 48.23% of your meetings over the last 12 months has been on student outcomes. That is a transformation from what it was a few years ago. Where very little of the time is being spent on student outcomes. Now you're spending almost right at half of your time. So I want to congratulate you for that. Also, you want to talk about something good. I had the good pleasure of having 4 of your principals in a workshop last week at the service center. I was motivated and inspired by their conversations about leadership and how positive they were about what's going on here in BC. And it really set a good example for the other leadership. And it made me feel really proud to be a part of your team and the limits where I get to do that. But when we look at this contractor, this is something that we keep track of every month. You may remember last month, Mary made a presentation on goal number 3 and gave you kind of a snapshot of what to look forward to in this time of year. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at goals. And of course, I've got to have a computer to look for me to do that. So I'm not sure what's going on with that.
It got unplugged on my picture, so it's.
Oh, okay. Here it comes.
Dave.
It's gonna be updated.
All right.
Always up there the worst time.
After work hours normally.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do when this thing does reboot, we're going to go over the goals, the proposed goals, and I want to remind you that the goals and the constraints belong to you as a board. So any questions that you have, we'll turn those over to the principals and let them defend how they came about those numbers and the goals, the baselines and targets. The goal progress measures, now those belong to the administrators. And so those are the things they're using, remember, to try to help achieve the goals that you set. And then we'll also talk about the constraints, and the constraints belong to you. There's superintendent constraints and there's board constraints. And those are the things that, based on community values, you feel like you are just non-negotiables in your district. So we'll be looking at those. Now, the constraint progress measures, those are Dr. Max. Those belong to him. Those superintendent constraint progress measures. We also have a new monitoring panel for you, and it's for the next year, but we think we'll be able to repeat it in years to come. And we're going to try to be intentional this year with community engagement events. And so, month in and month out, we'll be putting some of those back up in the monitoring calendar and highlighting those as we go.
Tony, I do have a question.
Yes.
When going through the goals, as we're waiting for them all to pop up. One of the questions that I had, and had some good conversation with Dr. Mack about it, is I know that all of our goals are set to the means standard, and we did that the last time we did this as well. But looking at the numbers and the percentages, would it be a benefit, and I know we've had the conversation, to look at, is meets what we need to be pushing, or do we need to look also at that approaches level to get those approaches students up, to where then we're looking at moving approaches to meets, and I know that's a huge window in that level. And so just a conversation, and a question that I had is, I know that the intent is for meets, but it's the district data and looking at it. How does that work into, I know last year, a lot of the principals, pretty much all of the principals were presenting on those approaches, every single student, because the board really wanted a full picture of where are we and how do we bump those students? What are we doing to bump those students to the next level per se? But interested in theory.
Yeah, I got to hand it to the principals. They did a really nice job on those presentations, and what they wanted to show you was that even though some of the kids didn't get to meets, they wanted to show you how much progress was being made at getting them to approaches.
Right.
And so, you know, for your goals, for your 5 goals that you have for Lone Star governments, meets or above is really like the gold standard.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to shoot for.
Right.
And I think you can expect these principals to bring you deeper, richer information as they report this year. That's kind of what they've committed to do as we discuss all of this. So I think you can expect that. Dr. Mack, what do you think about the question that she brought up about?
Really, it comes to, and I want to say about the process, this was my first time to do the process, and I appreciate, I know one of the principals said, and they could speak up about it, they'd like about the collaboration that we have. One of the important things when we wrote the goals was, and you were there, was the conversation of what's meaningful. Let's make sure we're measuring stuff that's meaningful. Let's not over test. Let's not do those sorts of things. And one of the principals had mentioned about, you know, when you're talking about measuring growth and scale scores and going from approaches to meets, that, and we've had this conversation, it's like, how close are we? But it's such a significant distance because it's meets that there may not be a lot of fluctuation. And so the discussion was simply that we may be able to see more of a finite movement using the approaches. Not that our expectations are down in any way, but I took it as more of a conversation of the movement of above that level. But I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that, but that was the conversation I recall about how much it took. Not that we don't want to have high standards, but that to show the growth, because that's what we're here for, is to show the growth.
So I can speak from the high school standpoint because graduation is so important related to our EOC assessments, and that's what's in goal 5 this year related to English. We were very intentional about thinking that when we are looking at performance, what requires them to meet that standard, the state keeps moving the target on us. And so, yes, in the new year of the STAR 2.0, they kind of lowered the standard a little bit, but that has not always been the case, especially for English language arts. For the most part, those testers had to almost double a score that you would have required in algebra, biology, or US history in order to meet the passing standard for graduation. And so we did have that conversation. And one of the things that we talked about specifically was it's hard to go and have a large expectation of an increase of the meets percentage. Whereas on the approaches, my team was ready to say, oh yeah, we can bring that up 10 to 15%. On the meets, it's like maybe 2 to 5, because it is so much of a gap from what it takes to get to approaches and meets, and then especially on the master's piece. When you think about the English language arts test, in order to be masters in previous years,
it was 87 or 90% to get to that master's level. And the meets part was even, there was a huge gap from meets to masters. So there's a big gap, like you said, from approaches to meets and from meets to masters. And in our sense, it's hard to, some of our teachers are here, to convince kids to meet a higher standard when the approach is all it takes for them to graduate. So we did have some of those discussions, and then we particularly talked about what could really be reasonable as an expectation. Not, and when you look at ours, it's hard, especially even at CCMR. Oh, they're only going up by like, or keeping it the same, and then they're only going 1 point, but we're already in the 90s. So it's really hard to have an expectation that you're going to move more kids further than that, when we do also still test all of our special education population, our emergent bilingual. All of those students are mixed into those numbers as well, but they are our target populations, and that is where we're looking for the key growth. So when we're thinking about how we're going to get more of them to approaches, we're going to work more on the differentiation piece for approaches. For approaches with our SPED and our 504 and our EB students. And we may be able to tell you a whole lot more successes related to that, whereas it was kind of like we're flatlining on a meets piece. And then if they do move the standard up, it's going to be really hard for us to even meet the expectation with that performance level increase.
And keep in mind too, when we're looking at these goals, the first three are basically the outbuilt reading goals: early childhood reading, early childhood math, CCMR. And these don't follow individual children through the system. What these goals do is they're based on, they're trying to evaluate the program. So goals 1 and 2 are evaluating the effectiveness of the overall early childhood program, K-3. The test comes at 3rd grade. So that's why when we go and look at the goal progress measures down below, you've got one for kinder, you've got one for first, and then you've got one for 2nd grade. And so those are the building blocks to get us to that 3rd grade school. So I was really excited when I got a call from Dr. Mack. The team was meeting. I wasn't here that day. And Mary and Rose were wanting to track 5th grade students to, wasn't it to the
To 9th grade.
Yeah, the English 1 test. So they had this really elaborate system. To me, it's kind of really fantastic to put together. And I know they're going to track those kids and they're going to work with it. But it was a little much for the Lone Star Government School. But that's the kind of thing that they're doing in the background. They are watching individual students as they move through the system. They are tracking them. They are making sure that there's interventions happening. Your goals as a board are to it's just making sure that the whole CCMR program is advancing. And we're going to have different kids coming through there every year. Then goal 4 and goal 5 are going to be a little bit different as well. So we'll get into those. I hope we didn't just talk around your question, but.
And I understand the threshold in meets, but I think my question truly is and I'm not saying we need to lower the standard. By no means do we need to lower the standard. But if you're constantly reaching for this goal that we're not making much progress on, when you talk about goals and setting good, smart goals, measures, like I understand these are measurable and attainable, but are we really trying to get all of the students? And what are we doing for all of the students? And if a lot of our students are in that huge gap, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I understand why they need to be at meets. I understand that that's LSG standard. I understand all of that, but looking at our district and our makeup and our data of what's happening with our students in Bay City ISD, that's where I think the conversation comes into play.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and that's what I love about this accountability system. It's not built on this, this group in the 62 to 69 range, like the old systems were. We just had this group. If we felt like we could move the 62 to 69 kids on that state test to get them over 70, great. But the ones that were really low or the ones that were really high didn't get as much attention. Right, because you're trying to move that middle group that can make a big difference on your sport. But with this system, you can't leave anybody out. You gotta be focused on the top kids, you gotta be focused on the kids in the middle, and you gotta be focused on the ones that are not scoring as well. Because the way the system's set up, where it's either relative performance or progress, school progress, you can score either way. Once you get your scores up there, then it's based on student achievement. So you've got a lot of different ways you can score. But I think the system breaks it well. I personally like the idea of shooting for meets, and I like to just, let's just look at this first goal, and then I want to have the principals explain how they set the baseline. So the first goal is early childhood reading. The percentage of third grade students who score meets grade level or above on the STAR reading assessment increased from 23% in September 23 to 38% by August of 28. So that third grade class is in the sports school. So Ms. Morris, can you kind of explain to the board how you set that baseline target?
So for the baseline, both Mr. Townsend and I looked at our data from last year and the region 3 data, and we made a comparison. And then from there, we came up with a realistic goal. And then the state recommends that we move up anywhere from 3 to 5% per year. So then in a 5-year goal, then we would be moving from will increase from 23% to it's 38 to 38. I had it just a little slightly higher, but I have not gone through the entire TA slides, the training that they use to go over Lone Star governance. But then when Dr. McKaysley called it out, you know, they recommend that we move in increments of 3 to 5%, and we went ahead and readjusted that day into this that you are now looking at.
Yeah, and what's difficult sometimes for the public to understand, that's at the meets level, that's at a very high level. So we're, you know, moving from 23 to 38, I think that's attainable, but challenging. So you can see what we did by subgroup by the year. And so
last year, I kind of think last year's a little bit of an anomaly. We had kind of a little perfect storm in our third grade that caused some score deficiencies that we all would have rather did better at. But so if you look at the year before that, we were at 28% on meets. So if you said, hey, I'm not gonna go off of that really low last year, I'm gonna go off of what we had the year before, we still was coming out of COVID and everything, then we're only going up 10 over 5 years instead of 15. Is that still a good mark? Or should it be a little bit higher? Because I'm sure the board would agree too, like even at the end of this 5 years, the 38%, we're not gonna be happy with that either, you know, like we're gonna want to be higher and higher and higher and higher, you know. So I want to make sure that we're setting our goals accurately and not basing them off of a weird year that we had last year.
yeah, absolutely.
So third grade, it is the year that students set their own baseline because it's the very first year that they take STAR. So I think that 38 is a good number.
Okay.
Yeah, like this is the first year that little Johnny is taking his reading STAR test, so he will get to set his own baseline. And then from there, we start using the progress measure formula to then measure little Johnny's growth. After third grade, he takes fourth grade reading, and once he takes fourth grade reading, then we can use that formula to keep projecting his growth from there till he graduates. But little Johnny's, it's going to be little Johnny's turn this year to set his own baseline, which is what we're very anxiously going to wait for.
Yeah, and keep in mind, in next year, you're gonna have a different little Johnny in the seat.
Right.
Okay, so what we're hoping to do is improve the program for all the little Johnnies to come.
Yes.
Right.
That's the difference. It's not, and this is what can be difficult to grasp, because we're not tracking individual kids using this, we're just tracking.
Right.
the
That's
program.
why I was kind of like, last year was kind of a perfect little storm in third grade. Well, those kids are in fourth grade now. And these new third graders that are coming in have had good training at Lane Roberts and they've had training at Cherry. So I'm expecting this year's third grade to be a lot better than last year's already. Just because we're stable, we got teachers, we got great leadership, like all this stuff, all that perfect little strong stuff is gone. That's out the door. We got a big set of rules now, you know, and whenever I was looking at what all we got going on in City Homes, I was thinking, I was like, hey, we might go to 38 the first year, like screw this 5 year stuff, you know. But I know that might be a little ambitious, but I just want to make sure that I was, you know, once outside looking in, like, is this 38 in 5 years? Really, are we undershooting a little bit, or are we right on?
I am right with you. I walked in that day just like that.
Okay.
I was, no,
I figured you
why
were.
why can't we start off with 38? Why do we have to wait 5 years? But again, just how all these other factors that were there last year that might not be there this year, we still have to take some of those factors into consideration because everything is a process and we all have to adjust.
Yeah.
Even all the little Johnnies, like a change from Lenny Roberts to THE is still an adjustment, you know,
Right.
even though we have better factors in place now that will only help us, you know, get to our goal maybe even faster, but they still have to adjust. And like one other factor that we need to also bring in that is going to be a huge factor in our success, the contributor, is that we now have really great reading that starts there and then continues there and then continues over at Cheney Homes. That has already been a huge contributor to the success that we have seen in these kids. And it's gonna continue to be a success, you know, up until their 5th grade year.
And I think that's what I was seeing. I'm really excited about our leadership that we have at each campus and seeing how they meet each other. And then I see 38 in 5 years. I'm like,
This is just a starting point. There's nothing saying it's starting, it's going to adjust a little bit, right?
Right, well, you know, what we're trying to do is set goals that are attainable, but challenging for a 5 year period. And the goal progress measures that we use can definitely change. But we like to try to keep the goals static for the 5 year period to make it challenging but attainable.
did we just throw away the last 5 year period because it's on the old system and we're starting over?
Yes, we had to start over because of the different tests and different.
And that was the other mitigating factor. I pointed out that, you know, perfect storm plus perfect storm with the new test, we can, and the accountability system. So, I mean, I see your points, definitely a perfect storm and we don't, you know, we don't know exactly what we see, but based on the start to the school year, with those 3rd graders this year, I believe it's substantial.
And I appreciate the fact that you have high expectations, and that's what we need from the board, we need that. And so it's something that we just need to have a conversation about right now. Do we want to up the ante, do we want to up the baseline or the target maybe and reevaluate the, Dr. Mack, I think you'd be the person to weigh in on that.
Can I ask one more question? Sort of along Jill's thinking, but we're talking about needs budget. Just talk over the 5 year period, we're talking about doing that budget 10%. By default, are we talking about everyone approaches shifting to that bucket, increasing it by 10%? So we are addressing, you know, everybody in that bucket sort of by default.
Well, and you know, even to that point, I think the face of those communities 5 goals needs to be at a higher level because we have accountability to our parents. We can track who went from, you know, not approaching to approaching on the side, and I think it's important that we do that, but the goal needs to be, you know, at a higher level.
So just to add something for that piece, the moving target, I think is important to remember. So 3rd graders to get meets in the past had to score 74%. They lowered that. In the current year, they only had to score 54%. But the full anticipation is they'll keep moving the mark up as we get more used to the test. And over the 5 years, they'll move the target on us, and what it took to get the meets is gonna take twice as much more to get meets. So if we put more on the tail end of the 5-year goal and they keep moving the mark higher, we may never meet the goal at all if they keep moving it. So I think that's one thing to remember that I was thinking of with our English especially. Never before had the meets been such a big chunk of an expectation lowered. But it has never stayed that way. The first time they rolled out the star, then the next year it was higher, and then the next year it was higher, and then the next year it was higher. And some of our students, we got to almost, it was when you took 2 tests, the reading and the writing separately, like they were taking 13 and 14 times a test before they ever got to graduate because they kept moving the target. So I think it's just really important to remember that, one, there's already a big gap between approaches and meets and then meets to masters. But if they move the target on us, then we may be looking back and going, oh, we added 20 more percent when they already lowered the 20% for us to get to the first meets in the first.
That speaks to the goal, exactly what you're saying. When we say we want a static goal, it will not be static. It will not be static. It's gonna move.
I just looked at another district, one of our districts, was doing Lone Star governance to see how they did goal one. And it's a district I really respect their curriculum leadership. And they moved from baseline year to 28, 16 points. 16% points. And I believe yours is 15. So that's I just looked at that as a comparison.
And that's from
They were a little above that.
Like, it's harder to move from
They're
70 to 85 than it is from 20 to.
their baseline was at 44.
And if I could clarify the first statement on the baseline, because my comments were on the growth, not the baseline. So whatever the baseline, whatever that is, and some of you may remember when we went to portfolios, beginning of year, end of year, evaluation of teachers, the recommendation of growth was 3 to 5%. When I looked at the goals, not the baseline. But, you know, we wanted to bring the baseline up, like you said, we bring that up. But as far as the increments, statistically, it's best to stay within the 3 to 5. And that's what the state has done on multiple measures for growth, not the baseline, but for the growth. So that's why I think we're close with that school district that has different schools, because we're talking about the endpoint, which is 3 to 5% each year. And so it may be a conversation about how do we feel about the baseline. Because I wouldn't deviate too far from the 3 to 5%. Just because that's statistically pretty sound that we see growth.
Right. I think teachers in the schools that are preparing those kids in early childhood are approaching retirement. I don't know how many ever are going to leave. I don't know. Those are factors, you know, how many of them are going to, it's the teaching staff is what it's all about. Right? To make them sleep moves, and you hope we can keep that.
I really think it's a baseline question. How do we feel about the baseline?
Is that what you're asking?
I think originally that's what Mark was asking.
Yeah.
I think the baseline was too low to begin with, because I
Well,
think that's what he was asking. right?
it's
And I think you said last year the baseline was at 20, last set of goals, the baseline was at 28, and we've gone down 5 points. And using the baseline of a year that was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
We've set the baseline based on those scores. I think that's the question that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I'm the man in the middle, and I hear all of this conversation. I love the fact that you guys want to have high expectations. And these folks have been studying this and trying to make sure that it's challenging, that it's attainable. So we just have to come to some kind of agreement. And we'll about that to help us out.
If we just do 12% this year, and just pivot and change it, and then go, you know, then add 2% for the next 4 years or something like that. There's a lot of conversation going on, and I'm trying to pay attention, but the goal, just what they're talking about is we were 5 points lower. And we can potentially make that 5 up like that. But we're only trying to do 3. And so if we do that and then add 3, and let's say we do 8 next year, then do we come back and change that baseline? And then just do a one-time.
Typically, it's most of our governments will stay the same 5 years typically. But you know, you can do that. It just would deal a lot of compliance with the integrity. Because you're supposed to have your goals for 5 years.
But if you meet your goal in year one, you have to reset a goal.
Maintain.
Yeah, and again, what we're talking about is not individual students, we're talking about the program. You know, and that's where.
So I think the thought and the question revolves around that baseline being at 23, when the previous goal that we had for one in the previous couple of years was at 28. And so we bumped that down to 23 because that's what the score showed from third grade last year. But we also know there were a lot of factors going into that 23 last year. So I think that's where the question really revolves.
And keep in mind too, we got a much more rigorous test this year than what we've had in the past. So that's going to be a factor going forward as well. That doesn't. So, you know, whatever you guys want to do, we will adjust it and go forward.
So why don't we, Dr. McElroy, share?
So how does the campus feel about, because we're seeing a baseline score, and just like Tony said, there's a new little Johnny in the seat. However, the baseline scores from last year was not your typical little Johnny sitting there with mitigating factors. So how does the campus feel and curriculum department, especially everyone, if we return to where we were before the anomaly and set at 28% as a baseline? I'm fine. I want to hear your rationale, and I support what you said.
Or even meet in the middle, and your first year goal is returning to the previous high baseline and then building from there.
I mean, is that what we did with UC attendance later? That's what we did. Yeah, we went back and remember we did the average. So that would, what you just said, James, would fall in line with how we calculated things. Yeah, but
Because the other factor is that the year before, they were not taking the same test. So we also had the book perfect storm, but we also had a more rigorous test.
But they lowered the scale, right?
Yes, the performance standards, yes, they did. So our baseline is that, so the 23 that you all see up there. The one on top where it says goal number 1, that's where we are currently at. That's where Tinny Homes is currently at. So we decided to take 3 percentage points and added to increase to a 5-year goal, right?
So I think
I
even
guess
though
we
it's
added
gonna-
3 percentage points to what we normally were getting before, which was 28, then you'd be at 31%. And on this model, we're not getting to 31% until almost 2026.
So we can either go up by 4 or go up by 5.
Or go up by 5.
I agree. I hope we're talking about the baseline.
Yeah.
We do not need
So-
to do, I strongly recommend we do not adjust the growth per year. Statistically speaking, the data is there. The state does not do that by accident. They have-
23%.
Yeah.
What if we did this? Yes, it would be against our integrity instrument. Yes, it would be docked points. But really, we're not here to get points for LSG, we're here for kids. And so what if we left it as in, Tinny Homes is gonna get to 30% this year. And then if we go back and adjust the goal, so be it. We go back and adjust the goal. We're not sitting in these chairs and doing this stuff to win a medal. We're doing it because we want to hold everybody up. So what if we left it as is at the end of the year, we revisit it when that comes up in our monitoring calendar, and if we have to rewrite the goal to be a higher than 38 because Tinny Homes is gonna knock it out of the park, then we write the goal and we take a ding on our integrity instrument and we say it was for the kids and it doesn't.
Also, it'd be an integrity issue.
Yeah, I'm like it's not.
Still raising the standard for us.
Actually, you've done that past.
Right, so I don't see I understand what you're saying, but in the end, it boils down to, we can rewrite the goal, because, hey, guess what? We can rewrite the goal, even if we come back next month and say, we don't like that, we want it to be at 100%. We can rewrite the goal, there's no one telling us that we can't do it as a board, so.
Yeah,
I like it.
And the standards, just so we-
Like, we're gonna, if we have to do it, we have to do it, and it's good because our students have knocked it out of the park. And we get to come back and celebrate that and say, hey, guess what, TEA, we changed the rule and we broke the rule and we broke the goal. Because our students did awesome and we'll take whatever.
We'll call it the BCISD exception.
Hey, we've done this before. 3 years ago, we changed the goal.
Yeah.
So it's been done before. The thing is, the setting, the way things are set up and the way LSG operates, all based on research.
Right, and I
And so
understand.
that's why, but I get, hey,
You tell us
there were
that we're knocking the stuff out of the park, you brag about it, or some other districts.
I do.
Let's do it.
And you know what, there's one factor that you can't, measure against any research, and that's expectations. And then delivering expectations and then delivering support to match that, and that's what these guys do every day. And so I have no doubt that they will do it at least as good as you asked for, but probably better. So am I hearing that you want to keep it the way it is and then reevaluate next year? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, all right, so.
I just have so much confidence.
Yeah, we're gonna stay at the
I know.
23.
Hey, I did do this.
In year one, and we're gonna have to read about it. Everybody's okay to redo it. Let's do it.
Tony, I'm goal number one memorized.
Well, they moved into.
Talk about it, throw one in.
All right, that sounds good.
He knows exactly the.
Every time I'm so in this floor, and I'll be like.
Right, it's gonna be
Okay,
hard.
yeah.
Okay, so let's go down to the goal progress. Page. Those. And again, these belong to the administration, but they're using in-class, which is a reading assessment. And it's the percentage of kinder students who score each grade level or above on the in-class reading assessment will increase from blank percent in September 23 to blank percent in October 24. The reason we don't have targets and baseline for targets is because
we don't have our data yet for our baseline. We just completed testing and we're disaggregating the data, working to disaggregate the data as we speak. And so as soon as we have that information, we will know what our October numbers are. We will be prepared to present that to you in October. But we did just wrap up our testing. We had a little bit of a delay in our in-class assessment. We got started a week late on that. So but we will have everything ready for you by October. As soon as we get that, it'll be plugged into the spreadsheet and we will have our numbers to move forward from there.
when we actually monitor it, we'll have that to present to you, but it's like that in every district that I work with right now. We just don't have the beginning of the year assessments complete yet. It's aggravated. It's aggravated. So looking at this goal progress measure 1.2, the percentage of first grade students, it's the same. We're using it in class, but now it's first grade students. And then goal progress measure 1.3 is second grade students within class assessment as well. So you will, we're going to be looking at goals 1 and 2 next month. So we'll have that beginning of the year data to look at, see how we're. It'll be interesting to see how we do. Okay, so going to goal, any questions on goal 1 besides what we discussed?
Yes.
Good conversation.
Yes, I'm trying to sit back and not, we would just, our goal was at 28, right? And then we come back, well, baseline, was last year's 28.
Finished
We
last.
finished last year.
Started with the year.
And why are we this year back in fall? Well, why couldn't, I mean, I understand that the justice getting hard. I understand it. And each year it's gonna get hard. It's not gonna get any easier. At this point, are we lowering our expectations when it comes to the baseline? See, I thought James was going to hit it on the nail with that. Because see, when I look at the baseline and I'm still going all the way across and I'm looking, that 28, if we had stayed to 28, look at the jump. What would it be?
But Priscilla, this was a different test this year. And that is based on, that's an actual number.
Yeah, that's not a lower.
That's not always standard.
That's what we all.
Yeah,
That's how we
Like, I'm trying to compare apples to oranges, and what Anna said she did is she didn't just take Bay City scores, she also looked around the region to see how everybody else did. And then she and Chris came together and put together a baseline. Based on the actual, what was the actual meets level?
The base. Ask that again,
Yeah, for Bay City ISD,
23.
23.
Our baseline is how we have performed.
That's
Those are our scores of our official.
past year's score. Yeah, so that's not something that she's playing with. That's the actual. Those other numbers down the way, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, that's a guess. Based on what they hope to achieve. And Dr. Mack's point is, research shows if you can move 2 or 3% a year with a program, you're doing good. And so 23 is the actual score.
And Tony, there may be just a misconception because it's saying September of 2023. That's really the May of 2023 real data. We're just reporting it to you now in September.
We're setting goals, right?
And that'll be true for the other ones as well.
As long as our expectation stays high, I'm good with it. In my mind, I'm looking as I look across, and I was gonna say something about the African American. Look, just look at that. Does that make me happy to see that everyone is increasing more? No, it's not. It's not going to make me happy. But I accept what you're doing, but as long as we are keeping this in mind, my expectations are high. I watched as a preschool teacher going in. I don't look at age, I don't look at grade level, I look at what I expect them to be at the end of the year. I don't want at any time for us to lower that expectation. I want that to always to be the forefront of whatever we do. And when I'm just looking, and I've been looking all day and trying to think I'm going to sit on my hand, I'm not going to say anything, but it bothers me. It really does. And hopefully when we get some schools, that we are there, because I've been telling you, I was ready to come in, and I was gonna be like, oh, they said they did this and that, and then I did this, and I'm like, so it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I've listened to what everybody's saying there. If we stay at 23, and 23 has the 14% need to be worked on. It does. Is something is wrong when we are doing an assessment, and I don't know what it is because I don't sit in a class with you every day. I don't know what it is. But as long as we as educators stay with what I think that y'all are saying, with high expectations and not lower, we're gonna have to make every child and every student come to a point that we are here and not here. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So if we go on to goal number 2, this was the early childhood math. And the goal is to increase the percent of third grade students that score each grade level or above on STAR math from 19% in September 23, 34% by August of 2021. Make that a little bigger.
The same 15% increase per year. What was our goal at the end of last year? Yeah, having all over the gym.
Right. the same.
So
Just a little more dramatic.
kind of have to go back to August of 2022. And the goal for that year was 25%. I'm looking back at the previous spreadsheet, and then we had projected a huge jump, 20-point jump from 22 to 23. And of course, this was all set up before COVID. And then, the target for 24 was 54%. And of course, now that's, you know, the new tests that's come in, there's a new accountability system, so all that goes out the window. But in 22, August of 22, the target was 25 for all students. It's just so hard. You really can't go back and compare previous years to this new, it's a whole new game. That we're faced with.
One thing I got, we're talking about high expectations, whatever they find in the be whatever, but Dr. Mack said the growth was on average 3 to 5%. Are we taking the low road by just doing it 3%? Do we want to look at percent per year, a little higher to set the standards, a little higher? For higher expectations, I mean, what made us go with 3? If it was at 3 to 5.
It's a baseline, new test, so many unknowns.
Felix, I think the other piece is the gap between what it takes to get a master's is a lot bigger.
It's
Same conversation.
If we want to change it, we'll change it. Okay, knock it out. If it's not a stretch goal, it's not a stretch goal. These are our goals for our students, and our district.
Yes, and you know, the conversation about we're having right now about reevaluating this next year is very reasonable, given the circumstances we're in. Because this is all stuff. What did the state do last week? They said, oh, there's time out, we're gonna push this back a month. So I'll put on 10 meetings waiting to see what the accountability rating for and how that's gonna play out. Now, because of the lawsuit, now we put it back.
Has anyone seen any validity studies done in the legislature? Because I'm sure that's what they're looking at, because I haven't seen anything. And I'm sure that is a huge concern as to why they're considering pushing it back. I mean, it's a new test, and I really think that's a different pushing.
Well, in measuring the scores this year, it's an anomaly where there was growth that, you know, through the roof. That's why everybody got their scores because it's coming off of the year. Really poor. So it demonstrates a lot of things. That's how we understand. So I think what you're saying about going back and looking at these goals again next year after we've had a year with this is very reasonable. And they're saying, I mean, they spent the last couple of months talking about this and working on it, looking at numbers and trying to come up with something that agrees with how to do it.
So is everyone good with that?
Well, you go back, Felix, I mean, is this comparable to like, are other districts using a 3% increase as far as?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna look at everybody,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna look at one that I really think is very similar. So I'm looking at both the goals to, they're going 3% a year. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that it's in bold. I mean, it is highly recommended.
What's their baseline?
On this one, their baseline was 51%.
So you think 3% per year is reasonable when you're at 15. At some point, you can't do 3%, you can't have 101%.
Right, but overall, statistically speaking, overall, for all baseline scores, the best metric is 3 to 5%.
And I think this goes back to the conversation of 19%. For me, sitting in this seat, I look at 19%, like 19%, that's the baseline. But it doesn't paint the picture of where we are as a district, because we have to get those students that are in that lower up. And so sitting in, and the public doesn't know. They would see 19%, they don't know what means. So I think that's where 19% is like
But what we really have to look at, I think, is every district's a little different.
Oh, I agree.
And, you know, so whenever your district here, this is just my impression, talk with the principals and so forth, but they really work hard at the lower grades. And they don't see the substantial progress like, boy, when they get to high school. Because of what they're doing in the other schools, by the time they get to high school, your high school is really performing at an extremely high level. Correct. If all these kids get dual credit, all these kids get dual side, have the kids, if we get goal 3, when we look at goal 3, CTMR, you're already at the A level. So it's gonna be hard to set. You want to go to that one?
Right, and I know that it's a huge,
Yeah. So I think it's you gotta look at the product of the whole system, you know. But when we go down to we're using the class again, for kinder, first and second. For our growth progress measures. And so for those, that's the same, that's what we do for goal 1. When you go to goal 3, this is DCMR, college career military readiness. This is an area where you really are shining. Increase the percent of graduates that are college, career, or military ready from 91%, which is current, in September 23 to 95% by August 28.
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. Look across the state.
Yeah. And I would like to point out that African Americans are the highest subgroup.
Yeah.
On this college career military readiness. So that's fantastic.
So what is the cap here? I mean, you can grow, but eventually you're gonna plateau. It's 95, really like.
100%. We have some school districts in the region that are not.
100%. Yeah, really. Yes.
Yeah, we have.
So then why are we only maintaining 1% in the first? Is there a rationale there?
There is, so something to share about that specifically is many of our students earned industry-based certifications in the past, and it was a one and done. You get the certification, it counts. That's not true anymore. You can get the certification, but you also have to take the level 2 course in order for it to get recorded and count. So they moved the target on us again, changed the game for us. So our goal is that we hope we don't lose a single kid.
Yeah.
We're gonna maintain, even though they changed the criteria to get a point.
Maintaining is winning because of that special circumstance.
Yes.
Yeah, and if we think about that, we're here for kids, and I can tell you, I had I had 2 kids go through my own that got endorsements and C's. These kids need freedom of choice too, they need autonomy, so there's no guarantee they're gonna stay within that strength, there's no guarantee they're gonna take that. Because if we start doing that, we're taking the choice out of their hands, and then we're like, oh, we need the point. I'm sorry, I know you want to take this and you've got a career path in mind, but we need this point, you know.
I have a feeling that will soon change.
Yeah.
It's not good for kids.
And Tony, the other thing to share with y'all, if you scroll down where our progress measures are, we're saying we're gonna get to 91% at the end of this school year, but currently our seniors are at 37. So we're gonna go from 37 to 91 in one school year. With all the other options that we have to get them a point, because they haven't gotten one yet.
Yes, I'd like to point out that this is different than what you've seen in the past. What we did in the last study goals, we had the goal progress measure for CTMR. We were measuring TSI, we were measuring dual credit, we were measuring IBC. Now they've made a little, I think this might be a really good shift. So they're looking at goal progress measure 3.1, it's looking at sophomores. And how many of them have a point for CTMR? And it might be a point because of TSI, dual credit, or it might be a point for an IBC. And so right now, 1.25% of those kids have it. And they're going to try to get 25% by the end of the year. That's just for sophomores. And then for juniors, you can see it's 21% to 40%. And then, as Mary said, on the senior class, they're going to try to go from 37% of them having a point to 91% in 1 year. That's That's a pretty,
That's a stout goal.
We can do it and we've done it before because previous classes weren't even at 37. So we know we can, even though they changed it on us. Ms. Lopez's team is doing a really good job of tracking those kids that have a certification but don't have a level 2. Our counselors worked really hard to get them in that course, even if they took that and something else, but in order for it to count, if we were looking at that. And then we have the program Ed Ready, that is basically it's a remediation course for math and English for college readiness. And if they didn't pass the TSI, they haven't been in dual credit, they don't have a CCMR point, they're already in the Ed Ready course now with their English and their math teacher senior year. And some of them are now almost done with English, even after the first of the 6 weeks. So we're almost 50% of those students that are going to get it by default through that. So we are very confident in being able to make that leap, but it is a huge leap.
And maybe I think it speaks to the very high goals and expectations you have, but when we say 100%, it's because we're doing an excellent job with our bridges programs too, and our special needs students to where they're getting IECs.
Right.
And they're meeting the goals outlined within their IEP, which makes them, so that is the pathway, and rightfully so, to 100% over time. But these are awesome numbers. This is, I really like the goal of the way we're looking at each class. It's ambitious, and because it's also a lagging data point, and so we're not going to see the fruits of the labor until the lagging data comes through. But I think it's a great proactive approach and very high expectations.
so what we're working on this year will count for a future years.
And one of the things that I'll share with y'all that's not in this data, Ms. Lopez, each month, as I report over the course of the year, will get us updated with each of those graduating classes, but also within that, how they're getting it, whether it's TSI for dual credit or through their certifications. We'll keep track of that so we know where our successes are in that piece. And one of our targets is particularly TSI math. So we're going to be working, and that's why we're looking at sophomores as well. So sophomores take algebra 2 and juniors take geometry unless they're honors, and then they take it the other way around. But we are working on revamping the curriculum with a region consultant to look particularly at when we teach the tested standards on TSI, based on then when we test them in TSI, to test them at the right points for them to be more successful.
That's so purposeful. Again, just commend you guys, because when you look at the curriculum, where it's TSI, TSIA, or even ACT, you have your course alignment to where kids get the maximum opportunity to pass because they've had the tests, they have the content that's going to be on that test. That's all purposeful. And I'm glad you shared that, because all that is not by accident. You know, some people just plug in and say, no, we do algebra 1 geometry and algebra 2. That's what we've always done. But when you do a deep dive into the curriculum and the test, they're going to be ready in that moment, sooner the better.
So you guys have any more questions about group? All I can say there is good work. Fantastic. So when we look at goal number 4, you know, when we got the 4, you have to have early childhood reading, early childhood CCMR, but you can elect to have a goal of 4 to goal 5. And so when we first met, we talked about that. What stands out when we look at the data, where do we need a goal to try to move our weakest spots? And so the team agreed that 7th grade students scoring each grade level or above on STAR math would increase from 22% September 23 to 38% by August of 28. So using the goal progress measures at the lower levels, what we're going to use is curriculum-based assessments in math for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, and trying to help at those levels and to push those numbers up. So it looks like we've already got some beginning of the year data on that, on those 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Right? So any questions on goal 4? Any comments, Rose, on how to set that goal?
So the baseline that I have for this particular goal on goal 4. So it's for my 7th grade math students. So my baseline is not last year's 7th grade students for the first year. For that baseline there, that is last year's 6th grade students. So when you see August at the end of this year, that's the same cohort of kids. So for all, 22% is what my 6th graders performed at meets last year. The goal for them, and generally looking at the data analysis I have for the previous years, even after this past year as well too, it ranges from a 4 to 6% increase. That's why that first year I chose to go from 22 to 26. Then away from the cohort, because I know I've got the additional strength coming from the lower grades, went to the 3% increase for a total over the years up to 38%. But that's why there's a difference between the first 2 years. The baseline and the first year are the same kids.
We'll go to goal 5 then, and goal 5. This is going to be high school English. EOC English 1. The percentage of first time English 1 EOC testers scoring each grade level or above on STAR will increase from 53% September 23 to 63% by August of 28. And so, Mary, I really like the way you wrote this. And let's talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
A little different.
So I do want you to know that that 53 is not what you saw in the data for the STAR results that we received. We wrote this goal as first-time testers, and our data that gets reported by the state includes all English 1 testers, even if they're second time, third time, and fourth time testers. Unfortunately, we can't track them with CBAs because they may pass English 1 and they're no longer in that class. So what we said was we were going to look at the numbers of first-time testers only. And right now, from last year's students that were in English 1, they were 53% of them already at the meets level. So we are going to take the next group to compare to them to go up to the next level. And if you look over the course of time, it is hard to take a meets number from 53 then to 63%. Statewide, it's really hard to get at the 50% mark. So I wanted you guys to know particularly that each month I'll report to you, it is first time testers only. It's the kids right now sitting in English 1, how they're doing with their CBAs along the way. We're going to do the same thing if you go down to the goal progress measures. We're going to do the same thing. Really, these are only first timers though. So when you're looking at Anna's students and then you're looking at Rosie's students, it's only going to be those students that are in that grade level that we track throughout the year. We just wanted to make sure that we took that out because last year, the approaches level was the only test at high school that was below 70%, but it's 66 and it included all of the retesters. And we have more retesters in English 1 than any other subject. In December of this year alone, we'll have 98 retesters in English 1, but they're not in an English 1 class. So their data will not be coming through in CBAs because they're not taking those tests with those English 1 teachers. So we wanted to kind of clarify that for everybody to make sure that when we're thinking about, well, really, we're talking about the same thing. We're checking to see how our curriculum is working in the content area. And in order to do that, we really have to only focus on first-time testers because they're the only ones in that class.
That's a huge credit to putting kids first also. We had this conversation and I know some of you are using the data tool on schools.gov or whatever it is. So all test taking in the district participation rate is 99%. And so what that tells me about the high school is they're taking hits in their accountability because they're doing what's best for kids and testing them and making sure they're there. So with that very high 99% participation rate, they're not playing the numbers game, they're playing the kids game. Let's help kids. And that kid may have failed 3, 4, 5 times, but they're getting that kid in there for that opportunity. And again, that's across the district from the last tape report. That is a very high participation rate. And so again, great progress and getting the kids in there. 99%.
Any questions on goal 5? So you got a couple of goals here, there's a little bit different approach. from What we've seen in the past, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how that works out. And again, next year, we will look at goals again, see where we are, when we get the results from the start. We'll bring that up in a meeting with you, and we'll slowly reassess. Maybe like in July, we can do that. I'll put some notes in my calendar to make sure we do that. And we will go back through all the goals and look and see where we, where we need to make adjustments. Is that fair? Well, thank you for the high standards. I think the high expectations. Looking at superintendent constraints. The first one is the superintendent shall not fail to participate in a board team building activity attended by 100% of the team of 8.
Done.
That was really great. So 100% of the team of 8 will attend BCISD board retreat. That's academy, that's a live, or which is the police spring board conference. So you all, Saturday was fantastic. I mean, just the teamwork that you guys are manifesting together, and the spirit works together. It's really good. Superintendent constraint 2 is the superintendent will not allow the attendance rate to fall below 92.23%. So that was our baseline, 92.23. So we'll be able to make a report for you in October. The goal would be to go to at least 93% by the end of 2024.
And that is a number that will not jump to, 95 overnight. I mean, that was, you guys know, we extrapolated a lot of data and really looked at trends, and that would be good for us. Of course, I want 95 at a minimum, but that's what we looked at. I do want to say another thing about constraint 1. Tony, you were there, we had a training, and just the fact of a team of 8, think about the time we were scheduled to be there and the time with great questions, great conversation. You guys did more than give up your Saturday. It was, I don't even know how many hours it ended up being, but and I know Trent has said this before, it's that idea that we're finishing each other's sentences. And for us to be together that long on a Saturday, it was really special to get the legislative update and all the new things that we're up against, and accountability as well. And so
And thank you to Jill for hosting it and allowing us your home to be able to sit and be comfortable on couches. And that last meeting was a little long, that's why we're there. Okay. The last was
And y'all, thank you so much for all the setup on a Saturday. I'm going to thank you for taking care of us.
Yes.
So I didn't hear the last few.
It was huge.
Then it went on.
It was huge. The applause was special. It's not.
So here's the superintendent, constraint 3 is the superintendent shall not allow the teacher turnover rate to increase. And so our baseline is 24% this year. And so the target, we haven't really set a target yet, so.
And so I do have a target there, and I want to be transparent with the board, share everything. And if you look at how this is how it was worded previously, right? Effective teachers, right? It wasn't, however you guys want to measure it. I brought both numbers today. So if using the taper report, historically, it was at year ending 2022, it was 19%. If you just say anyone who didn't come back for whatever reason, it would be about 16%. And if you measured it by eliminating the things that are in the goal, it's 10%. And so I just want to make sure you guys are good with the goal. If you want to reword the goal, that's why I put both numbers there, because it's whatever you want is how we'll do it. And now it's a live piece of data. We're not going to wait for taper. So we have a running list of anything that happens. So that's where our focus is.
What do you feel most comfortable with? What makes sense to do in this part?
I would say, yeah, I would say.
owns this one in collaboration with us.
Yes, absolutely.
I remember that.
But I like the fact that he's asking for two.
Well, yeah, and because I want to be transparent in that you show two numbers there.
Right.
Well, how did we get those numbers? And I got the lower number by applying the definition up there. But if we change the definition, say, oh, we're going by table, and that's all we're gonna do. And when I say table, we won't wait for that before we come out. But we can run that formula.
And I like the idea of not counting retirees against us, they're gonna retire. But I think as long as we're focusing on it intentionally, that's the important thing. So whatever you pick, stick with it.
Because you can see, that's why I put that 19 there, because that is,
Yeah.
that is the exact data Iowa State would look at it. It went from 19 to 16. We know we gotta do better, and we know there was a perfect storm last year.
So if you want to say 15%,
If, yeah, as, we can do 16%, and we'll just keep that way.
I can tell you that is a very aggressive goal. We have one district that I work with that's got a lower rate this year. It's kind of unusual. They don't have that. They were up to
Just real quick, if we keep the 16, and I got. Just for the improvement. So the 16 in 2022, we're saying we're sticking at 16. The state was at 17.7. We're lower than that, and don't get me wrong, we've got I have a long way to go. That's my goal. I have a long way to go for teacher retention, and I think we did a phenomenal job with recruiting this year, and unbelievable job of recruiting this year to get everyone in here, and I'm glad, but I wanted to report that 16 is lower than the state of 2022. We'll have the state of 2023 for, I don't know, maybe very soon, maybe by June.
I'm gonna direct it back to you again. You're comfortable with that goal?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. So I'm not impressed. I don't think we need that. I don't think with that. I don't think any of us are. Yeah. You know, it's a focus. Well, because we've been there for a while. It's never been fire. I want people to stay and work for this.
And there's a lot of constraints there as well. We talk about a perfect storm, with scores a perfect storm with where we are with the recruiting and retention. And I think from federal programs money to one of my other goals, and this next will be huge with teacher retention. A big part of teacher retention, we know it started in Tenny Holmes, and Lake Roberts as well, is the curriculum. When you're able to tell teachers, here's everything with autonomy. No, it's not. You teach this every day. What we've rolled out of those campuses, no lesson plans. No staying up all night long on a Sunday, so you're ready for a lesson on the day. You got your family. The curriculum is going to be there for you. It's going to be in a shared sheet. And I think you heard some good things at the training about that new curriculum that we're bringing in. Not new as in regimented, teacher ownership, teacher autonomy. The teacher knows how to teach the kids. We need to give them the resources of kind of a shared stolen sequence. I think that's going to do a lot long term for the fact that our teachers. I know when I was a high school teacher, I went from teaching chemistry to physics, and that takes some studying. And I mean, I was just a day ahead, you know, so I think it'll be a great retention piece too, once we get that all the way to the hospital.
And we'll do our part as a board to help as we navigate our financial situation and go through budget workshops over the next few weeks and get that piece right and better. We'll get straightforward. And I appreciate those commitment. You guys are completely committed to that, and a lot of the long-term decisions, we know we're going to be prepared for that. We are. We're in a lot better shape. Fund balance is substantial, so we are ready.
So I went ahead into the form and I changed it to 16%. And that would be the target. So 24% this year is our baseline to 15%. The last superintendent constraint is the superintendent shall not tolerate physically aggressive behaviors among students. And so the district and campus personnel will collaboratively review and report discipline data every 6 weeks. And so you can see the way it's laid out. Well, I can't, for some reason, I'm not able to, let me see if I can make that move.
I can see it in my version.
Okay, this page, I'll give what it is. But you'll notice it's like August, September, October. So on the red months that are listed there, that's when we're gonna report. So we'll report in October, January, March, and May. But it'll be key data from all of those months. We'll have to sit and discuss, exactly how that report's gonna look. We want to do similar, reporting period. And they have data that they collect and input into the system, so we won't be hard for you to pull.
And just to share with everybody on the data, again, how you pull the data and your transparency, how you're pulling the data is important. So when I first pulled the numbers, and I have them here in my version, I have them. When I first pulled them, I was like, wow, those numbers are low. However, administrators, the majority of those should be a 41, that should be a 41. However, the data wasn't pulling properly because discipline for elementary students is different. And so if I pull that data out of on data suite, it's only going to pull something that would be at the code, you know what I'm talking about, code 21 level towards a change in placement. So where an elementary school may not be a change in placement. So I'm pulling the raw data and I expect that the numbers may not go down. When I came in last year, I was observing and, hearing about restorative practices, and that's fine. However, if restorative practices aren't working, you have to do other things. If that teacher is having that student pulled out of the room every day and there's nothing happening, I respect restorative. I just say if it's a referral, it's and one. A consequence, and if you want to add the restorative loss. But that teacher has already dealt with it. That teacher has already been doing tier 1 intervention and working with the student. That student gets to the office. Another, and I'll be transparent here, another indicator, and you guys know I have all the referrals live right here. I can see every referral is we need to stay away from talk to or counsel the student. The teacher did that. The teacher did that before they ever got to the office. And so trust me, they're negotiating and working with those kids. And I know we do a great job, but I just want to say that for the record, guys, that's what I support. I support that we go all the way to the 41. If the teacher writes a referral, there's no need to work backwards. You can do a restorative and one, but they need to understand the teacher sent the referral for a reason. Doesn't need to be questioned, just like a machine. If it's there, let's crank it out, and then that will also be a huge teacher retention thing over time that we're going to hold.
So we'll be reporting on it. So on board constraints, we have 4 board constraints. And the first one is that you will not fail to be represented during community engagement activities to promote the board's vision goals each month. Sound good? Okay. The board shall not allow discussion outside of agenda items during the meetings. Number 3, the board shall not allow less than 50% of the time in meetings to be spent on student outcomes. As I mentioned, you were like at 48.53% for the last 12 months. So we're gonna get there. The board shall not allow a year to go by without holding a team building activity.
We did that.
We've done that.
Yeah, can we talk about constraint 3?
Sure.
Because I really feel like there's stuff that's out of our control that keeps lowering that number. And I looked at last month's agenda, and there were 7 items, and it was tax delinquencies and presentations on that. Can we limit a speaker to 5 minutes? Because they send us their presentation ahead of time. We should have already read and had our questions answered. So a 5-minute summary with some questions, not a 40-minute presentation on a PowerPoint that we already looked at.
Yeah, I had the same conversation with another student earlier today. And the way she's dealing with it is people are coming to the board to make presentations. She gives the time. Or she'll say 10 minutes, whatever. And provide any kind of other information, videos, Written material will give it to them at a time, but this is your time.
So 10 minutes.
Somebody said that.
Well, or whatever. is reasonable.
And also, right, and also just, we've had these conversations, the team has, our conversations have been, because I mean, really, it probably be a good time to mention it, really. How much information are you getting in my board newsletter? A lot. You know, teachers yesterday, I said, I tell you guys everything, I love that letter, and I know, there's some days I'm like, I know it's too much. But you have seen it, and just like some of the items in the consent agenda tonight, you've seen it for 3 weeks. You know, so, our approach is gonna be and Mr. Townsend will model it tonight. You know, he's got all his T's crossed and his I's dotted, but he's gonna come up and say, you have the information. You have it. Is that?
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yes.
But because there doesn't have to be some. You know, when you have the 313. I think it's 402.
Or whatever it takes.
The value utilization agreement. That seems to be something that's. Far. So what we're looking at is over the previous period, how to do. Now, you may have one meeting that's 33%, this will be that, so we can put.
Yes, we can limit that when you're asking them to come to present tax stuff or whatever it is, we have to have those presentations, we have to do that. But we can very much so limit that, if the board's okay. Want to do that.
Perhaps to be able to email Dr. Mack our question.
Yes.
And he, there's really never seen the.
Oh, that's.
And I love that, I should, that part, that is huge. I get text messages, I get phone calls, I get emails, it's a great conversation. You may be questions, and sometimes I'll say, let me get with our folks and I'll get back to you to make sure we get a good answer. I get great questions, and that's what we want, all those questions answered before we get here. Not just for efficiency, but be accurate and get that information out. So great point. Thank you for that.
So what you're looking at here is the last piece that we need to review and approve. And from the goal progress measures, you probably noted that there were the 8s embedded in there. So we just pull them over here to the goal, to the monitoring calendar. And we plugged in where the goal progress measures are going to be reviewed, where the constraints are going to be reviewed, where the board evaluation happened. One thing we did not put in, which I'm hoping we will in the future, is in this other column over here, that we can put in some opportunities each month for you to come on to school events or other events and, you know, promote the district's regional goals. We'll talk about that. And so we've got that happening really all over the region. And so we'll keep bringing that before you. But basically, that's it. That's what we have to present. This has been a fantastic discussion. I appreciate your leadership and the leadership of the team and hard work of the teachers. Classroom, yes, and we got teachers. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions on LSG before we move to adopt these goals?
That will be.
We deleted that.
Is that on your copy?
The superintendent's not availability.
Well, I think that's more a team of 8 training that's required by law for us.
The other one we had a very good set of like school. Right.
Yeah.
We have to keep them on.
All right, so is there a motion to be made for adopting the LSG goals?
Make a motion, we adopt the LSG goals as presented.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Are there any questions or further? All right, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion passes 7-0. Thank you all so much for your work on those goals. I know that is a lot of time and work that went into it, and a lot of meetings and discussion to set us up for the next set of 5 years. So I really appreciate it. All right, moving on to the next item of business, which is our public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rates. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, okay.
Good, good to see you this evening. Doing well.
Okay.
While we're waiting on, Mr. Johnson to come up, Ms. Carmen. You always tell me don't do this, but I'm doing it anyway. Ms. Carmen, you are on, your department is on time, and we appreciate you. Because right now, you have our back. You are taking care of us, you are taking care of the district, and I want you to know it's not going to come. So thank you. Ms. Carmen. Thank you.
I like tree has more leaves on it.
Everybody keep going.
Yeah, $5 a week. Oh, man. That was good. I'm getting the dog so weird. Man. God. Here we go. We need to bear the pain. We need to do some of the
Well, we're about to do it.
Yeah.
Hey,
So what, that's after it.
For anybody.
this is a, good evening. This is a public meeting that required to adopt last board meeting, to propose the tax rate. And on this meeting, we're adopting the tax rate, which you proposed last meeting. So I'm gonna go over, information that was basically required public meeting. And so, reviewing things, June 20th, 2023, the BCISD board adopted 23-24 budget. July 14th, we received, the appraisal roll from Texas, they're not Texas, but they're from the appraisal district. So at that point, our net taxable value for M&O $1,910,000,000, which is an increase over the prior year's appraisal amount of $236 million. And the net taxable value for INS purposes, the appraisal was $2,165,000,000. And for an increase of $235 million. And the reason why there's a difference is because the M&O taxable values do not include the chapter 313 valuation that's included in INS. So that's where that's reflected. And August 15th, we received our total renewable tax rate from Matador County Tax Assessor Collector. We work up, she and I together, work up a template in the schedules and come up with a tax rate on current law for what we're proposing for our tax rate. The total tax rate for M&O and INS is $1.4446. And so we propose a tax rate on August 15th of 68.5 cents. M&O and INS 36 cents for a total of $1.44. And so the good news about this, because of the legislature's done, and also the proposed tax rate is based upon $100,000 homestead exemption. We were all instructed to propose a tax rate, which I said last time, based upon passing $100,000 homestead exemption, which will actually be voted on in November. So it's kind of different. So therefore, our tax rate that we're proposing is 21 and a half cents less than last year's rate. And so you can see the difference. So last year we adopted an M&O rate of 87.620 cents. This year we're proposing 68.5 cents for M&O, INS 38 cents, and INS this new year, not to see I have an error there. On the right side, it should say 2022-24, 36 cents. So basically, it's that we're We now adopt this tax rate today, we're reducing our tax rate by 21.54 cents. And then. It also, requirement also, even though we adopted the budget in June, real fast, information. This is the ad that was in the paper, that's required to be posted. We posted according to regulations, so it has the information that we submitted to the tax assessor collector, and together we work up the second. So one of the interesting things is on part it says comparison of proposed levy with last year's levy. On an average home value, taxable value, the taxes for the school district will go down $586 based upon this new tax rate. So you can see the states having this contrasted tax rate going forward. So hopefully, which I think then our state payments from the state will increase. So this is also a deal where it shows review that we want to all adopted, but we had a $2.8 million that's we adopted in June. And then we adopted by function. So the total amount of expenditure budget that we adopted, we all adopted was for operating budget 39,922,000, and then the INS portion paid that at $7,206,000. So then in food service at the time, we also had to require to adopt the food service budget. So we all did this, and so the estimated revenue 2.5 million. Expenditure to 2.4 million, projected surplus for the current year ran for food services 42,500. And this is the resolution that I'm asking y'all to sign and pass, which I will deliver to the tax assessor collector tomorrow, so they can reduce the tax savings. So anyway, any questions?
Are there any questions?
That was pretty fast. I picked up on the fast. I like it.
All right, so if there are no questions, we'll move on to the approval of item B, which is the approval of the 23-24 tax rates. There a motion to be made.
Make a motion that we approve the resolution as presented in the board vote with a new tax rate.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
All right, any further questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, item C, discuss and consider approval of private tax resale on account number 24905 pursuant to Texas Property Tax Code section 34.05.
And we've talked about how those tax sales go, and that all of these extra fees, if you will, were included in the sale to cover our attorney fees and et cetera. And that was in a few newsletters. I don't know if there was any questions about it at all. But we saw that, you know, it's good for the district, and we know it's difficult to sell property these days. I recommend that we accept this and sell this property.
Are there any clarifying questions before motions made?
It doesn't matter if it's bought it, if it's an employee or anything like that. I don't think so. I can throw about the property and see if I was missing out or something.
All right, is there a motion?
Is it anymore?
Yes.
Yes. So important.
Is there a motion to be made? All right, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Are there any further questions, comments about the sale of the property as presented in board vote? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, moving on to D, a public hearing on the proposal of a district of innovation amendment. Sorry, that was The tongue twister report
Hey,
is fine.
1-9.
Hello, sir, how are you?
Good. So, each of you have the information that's been provided, ahead of time on the district innovation amendment that we're proposing. The short version is that, the counselor 80-20 rule, education code, 3.06, they, have made some additions and changes to it, which would require additional reporting by the counselors. The 80-20 rule is they want you to spend 80% of your time on counseling activities, and no less than that. But in addition to that, they've added that they have to keep track of that, and specific elements, and then they have to report that, and then also have yearly audits. So our exemption would take that off the counselor's plate, and that's the amendment in a nutshell to cover the question.
So to clarify, there's a lot more on our counselors, but because of innovation, we're going to give them a little more free rein to their jobs.
We're not gonna saddle them with having to keep track.
Okay.
And then report it and have to do,
All the things. that we did. Perfect. Any other questions for clarification for Mr. Johnson?
We're not saying they should spend less than 80%, we're just saying they don't have to done.
No,
They have these things they have to do, they're going to adopt.
Right.
So I don't know.
All right, moving on to item E, approval of the district and innovation amendment. Is there a motion to be made?
Thank you for most of the district of innovation amendment.
All right, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Any other further questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right. Item F, presentation and approval of district improvement plan and campus improvement plan goals and objectives for the 23-24 school year. Hello again, sir.
the district improvement plan, we give you a PowerPoint, which is a summary of the goals and performance objectives. We had a district needs assessment in each campus last May, and the goals do not change, but the ways, the strategies that we need to get there do. And I did outline some of the changes in that information for you. Did also present this to the Education Improvement Council, and I did the BOI as well. And so presenting it to you as well. You're approving the goals and objectives for the district improvement plan, and the campus improvement plans are there for you as well.
Are there any questions? Or is there a motion to be made?
Motion that we approve the district improvement plan goals as presented in board.
All right, there's a motion been made to approve the district improvement plan and the campus improvement plan for 2023-24. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Any final questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. All right, consent agenda. Is there anything off of this agenda that anyone would like to remove for separate consideration? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to be made?
Motion, it's in agenda as presented in board book.
All right, is there a second to the motion? All right, we have a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, moving into executive session. We're going to convene into closed session. Consultant number 1 to consult with an attorney regarding status and implementation of application process and legal advice related to HB 5, Chapter 403 of the Texas Government Code, Section 551.071 and 551.129. Number 2, personnel matters if necessary may be taken into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074 to deliberate the appointment, employee evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, resignation, or dismissal of public officer or employee, including contract recommendations for campus and district level administrators and teachers. And number 3, a presentation and discussion of district safety and security audit findings. The board of trustees may enter into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076 to hear the report. We will move into closed session at 7:48.
All right.
54 p.m. Discuss and consider approval of hiring. The hiring of contractual personnel. Is there a motion to be made?
Motion to approve the hiring of contracted personnel.
All right, is there a second to the motion? All right, we have a first and a second. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, last item of business is adjournment. Is there a motion to be made? There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All right, any questions, comments?
Do we need some of the?
We don't need to do anything with the audit, it's just a report, right? Yeah. All right, excuse me. All in favor? Aye, opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We adjourn at 8:55.